The hall was buzzing with activity. People were chatting, laughing, and adjusting their seats. The lights were bright, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. It was one of those events where everyone expected something big, something grand, something that would leave them talking long after the doors closed. Many had come with high hopes, thinking they would see a performance full of skill and showmanship. Some had even come with skepticism, wondering if any of the young performers would really stand out. In the corner, quietly slipping through the crowd, was a girl who looked like she wanted nothing more than to stay invisible. She wore simple clothes, nothing fancy, and her small bag hung loosely over her shoulder. There was nothing about her that demanded attention. She moved with careful steps, almost as if she were afraid of being noticed, and yet there was a subtle confidence in the way she carried herself. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, but there was also a softness in them, a quiet determination that no one could quite name. As she approached the front, she noticed the other performers. They were rehearsing last-minute scales, whispering to each other, and checking their instruments. Some of them had flashy outfits, expensive instruments, and the kind of confidence that made it seem like the world already belonged to them. The girl watched for a moment, taking a deep breath, then stepped forward. When the organizers called her name, she moved to the piano in the center of the stage. It was polished and shiny, the kind of piano that looked perfect under the bright lights, and she gently rested her hands on the keys. A hush fell over the audience. She opened her mouth to speak, and her voice was soft but clear. "Excuse me," she said, "I would like to play just one song." The crowd stirred slightly. Some eyebrows raised. A few people whispered to each other. One of the event organizers frowned. Usually, performers had prepared multiple pieces, and the audience expected variety. A single song felt unusual. Some people looked skeptical, thinking, how can one song make an impact? But there was something in her tone, something honest and calm, that made them pause. She didn't seem nervous in the way that made people fidget or stumble. She seemed certain about what she wanted to do, and that quiet certainty caught the attention of a few audience members. After a short pause, the organizers nodded. "All right, one song," they said. "Go ahead." The girl smiled ever so slightly and took her seat. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. At first she just looked at them, as if she were memorizing each note, and then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost like a whisper. They didn't fill the room with loud sound or dramatic flair. Instead, they were gentle, delicate, and careful. At first, the audience didn't react much. Some people shifted in their seats. A few checked their watches. A couple of others whispered to the person next to them. It seemed ordinary at first. The girl wasn't trying to show off. She wasn't hitting the keys with force or speed. She was just playing, but slowly something began to change. The notes started to weave together into a melody that was simple but deeply moving. It wasn't flashy, but it carried emotion. Every note seemed intentional, filled with meaning. People stopped whispering. Eyes that had been wandering now fixed on the girl. Some leaned forward in their seats, sensing that something different was happening. The way she played wasn't just music, it was a story. Each chord seemed to carry feelings of hope, sadness, joy, and struggle all at once. There was a vulnerability in her performance, a feeling that she was opening a part of herself to the audience without saying a single word. Those who had been skeptical now sat quietly, drawn in by the unexpected depth of the music. The girl closed her eyes as she played, letting herself feel every note. Her fingers moved across the keys with precision. Yet there was a softness in the way she pressed them, a gentle touch that made the piano sing. The room seemed to grow still, as if time itself had slowed down to listen. People forgot about the event, the other performers, the noise outside the hall. All that mattered was the song she was playing and the emotion she was sharing. Some in the audience felt a lump in their throats. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. A few people had tears in their eyes without even realizing it. One elderly man clutched his chest, moved by memories the music seemed to stir. A young woman sitting near the front wiped a tear quietly, feeling a connection she couldn't explain. Others simply sat in awe, mesmerized by the calm power in the girl's playing. Even those who were normally critical found themselves caught off guard. A few judges exchanged glances, nodding slightly, recognizing that something special was happening. It wasn't about technique alone. It wasn't about awards or recognition. It was about the feeling, the honesty, and the courage it took to play a song so personal, so complete, and so unpretentious. The girl didn't rush. She let each note linger. She allowed silence to breathe between phrases, making the music feel alive, almost like it was speaking directly to each listener. She didn't need applause. She didn't seek validation. She simply wanted to play this one song, and the room, slowly and inevitably, started to lean in and listen with everything they had. As the song continued, the audience began to realize that this was not just a performance. It was a statement, a moment, a gift. People who had come expecting entertainment found themselves experiencing something far more powerful, something human, something real. The simple act of playing one song had captured their full attention, and the emotions in the room were tangible. By the time the last few notes approached, the audience was holding its collective breath. No one wanted to interrupt the spell. Even the organizers, who had doubted her request for a single song, were watching in quiet amazement. The melody had grown beyond the simple beginnings and now resonated with every listener, making them feel as if they were part of the story, part of the girl's journey. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a brief silence, as if the room was taking a moment to let it all sink in. And then, slowly, softly at first, the applause began. People stood, clapped, and cheered. Some were crying openly now, moved beyond words. Others simply smiled, unable to speak, their eyes fixed on the girl who had achieved something none of them expected. The girl bowed her head slightly, a small, humble gesture, and stepped back. She hadn't sought this reaction, and yet it felt deserved. She had asked for only one chance, only one song, and that single choice had transformed the entire room. The energy was different now, charged with respect, admiration, and awe. People whispered to each other, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Some admitted quietly that they had underestimated her. Others simply nodded, knowing they had been part of a rare moment. Backstage, the organizers exchanged surprised glances. They had expected a short, polite performance, nothing more. Instead, they had seen a young girl command a room with nothing but a piano and a song. They realized that sometimes talent doesn't need extravagance to make an impact. Sometimes it only takes authenticity and courage to leave a lasting impression. As the girl walked off the stage, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't aimed to impress anyone with speed, skill, or flashy moves. She had simply wanted to share her song, the one song that meant everything to her. And in doing so, she had captured the hearts of everyone in that room, proving that sometimes one small act can create something unforgettable. That day, the audience learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. They learned that talent isn't just about what you can do, it's about the heart you put into it. And they learned that sometimes the most powerful moments come from those who least expect to shine. The girl had asked for just one song. She got much more than that in return. She got the attention, respect, and admiration of everyone who had witnessed her courage. And though the day wasn't over and the event would continue, the memory of that single, heartfelt performance would linger far longer than anyone could have imagined. After her first few notes, something unexpected began to happen in the hall. The initial curiosity of the audience slowly turned into attention. People who had been distracted by their phones, whispering neighbors, or wandering eyes suddenly stopped and leaned forward. The soft, delicate notes of her song were not just sounds, they were a gentle call that captured their focus. It was as if the room itself had shifted, leaning closer to listen, waiting to understand what this quiet girl wanted to tell. Her fingers moved across the piano keys with careful precision. Each movement seemed deliberate, yet effortless. She wasn't rushing to show how fast or skilled she could be. Instead, she allowed the notes to breathe, to exist, and to touch the hearts of the listeners. There was a pause between certain chords, almost like she was letting the music speak on its own. In those moments of silence, the audience could feel the depth of the emotions behind her song. Some people in the audience tried to maintain a neutral expression at first. They didn't want to appear overly impressed or emotional, thinking perhaps it was just a beginning of a regular performance. But the more she played, the harder it became to ignore the music. Each note carried a story, even though no words were spoken. It was clear that this song meant more than just a performance. It was personal. The melody grew subtly. It started with soft, low notes that felt intimate, almost like a private conversation. The kind of notes that pull at something inside you without demanding attention. Then it moved into higher, brighter sounds that seemed to shimmer with hope. The audience could feel the contrast, the gentle sadness of the beginning and the hopeful lift of the melody's rise. The music was painting emotions in the air, and people found themselves drawn in, unable to look away. One young woman near the front leaned forward, her hand resting over her mouth. She couldn't explain why, but she felt an emotional tug, as though the girl at the piano was speaking directly to her. Across the room, an elderly man sat rigidly in his chair. He had been skeptical from the start, certain he would leave unimpressed. But now, as he listened to the rising notes, he felt a strange warmth in his chest, memories stirring that he hadn't thought about in years. He looked around and noticed that he was not the only one affected. There was a collective, almost unspoken realization. This was no ordinary performance. The girl herself was completely absorbed in her music. She closed her eyes and let her body sway slightly with the rhythm. She didn't notice the audience's reaction, but that didn't matter. She was focused on expressing everything she felt through each key, letting the piano speak the words she couldn't say. It was a strange kind of magic how one person's honest expression could capture an entire room. Without a single sentence being spoken, some people started to whisper quietly to each other. But even then, their voices were hushed. "She's amazing," one person said. "It's like she's telling a story," whispered another. But no one dared interrupt. It was as if the music had created a bubble around her and the piano, a bubble that the audience had stepped into without realizing it. Inside that bubble, nothing else mattered. Not the event, not the other performers, not even the time. Everything was about the song and the story it carried. As the song continued, it became clear that she had a unique way of connecting with the audience. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. She didn't need theatrics to get attention. The simplicity of her music made it even more powerful. Every chord, every pause, every soft note felt deliberate. Each was a choice, a small piece of her soul laid bare for everyone to see, and the audience, knowingly or unknowingly, responded. Hearts were quietly touched. Eyes glistened. Some people sat motionless, holding their breath, not wanting to disturb the fragile emotion that had formed between the girl and the hall. Even the organizers, who had expected a brief, polite performance, were now watching in disbelief. They had anticipated something small, a simple recital that would pass unnoticed between other acts. Instead, the girl had captured something rare, a roomful of strangers, all completely silent, all deeply engaged, all moved by a single song. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that what was happening was beyond their expectations. It was not just her skill that captivated everyone, it was her honesty. There was no pretense, no effort to impress beyond the music itself. People could feel the story behind her performance, though they did not yet know the details. They felt the courage it took to play something so personal in front of so many. Some nodded subtly to themselves, recognizing that bravery and vulnerability could create an impact far greater than any flashy performance ever could. In the middle of the song, there was a moment when she hit a particular chord that seemed to resonate through the hall. The sound wasn't loud, but it was profound, vibrating through the wooden floors, the walls, and even through the hearts of the listeners. Several people leaned in instinctively, as if they could absorb the emotion through the very air. The melody lingered, giving them time to reflect on what they were feeling. It was rare for a single note to carry such weight, but she had mastered the art of letting her music breathe. allowing it to settle into the hearts of everyone present. A few children in the audience, initially restless and whispering to each other, suddenly grew quiet. They could sense something different, though they didn't understand exactly why. Music had a universal power, and even without fully comprehending it, they were drawn into the emotional current of the performance. Some of them sat forward, eyes wide, as if the girl at the piano had unlocked a secret world they hadn't seen before. People started to notice little details in the performance. The slight smile when she reached a high note, the gentle pause that allowed a phrase to sink in, the way she leaned into the piano as if sharing a secret. Every movement was small but meaningful. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures have the largest impact. The audience felt that this was intentional, that she was communicating not just through music but through presence, sincerity, and attention to every detail. As the song reached its climax, the melody became richer and fuller, yet it never lost the gentle essence that had drawn people in at the beginning. The soft notes merged with the higher, more confident ones, creating a balance that seemed impossible to achieve. Some people were on the edge of their seats, not daring to blink or move, afraid that even the smallest action might break the spell. They realized that this performance was not just music, it was an experience. A journey that they were all traveling together. Guided by the girl at the piano. The audience started to feel an unexpected connection, not only to the song, but to the girl herself. Though she had shared no words about her life, her emotions spoke loudly. People felt empathy, admiration, and a sense of awe. They could see courage in her posture, vulnerability in her movements, and strength in her music. In that room, strangers felt united, experiencing the raw power of art that transcends words. Even the quietest members of the crowd found themselves responding. Some nodded gently with the rhythm, others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. A few people found tears forming in the corners of their eyes, and they didn't try to hide them. The emotion was genuine, impossible to ignore. And the girl didn't change her approach. She played with integrity, letting the music flow naturally, allowing the audience to feel exactly what she intended. By the time she neared the end of her song, it was clear that she had accomplished something remarkable. She had begun with simple notes, humble and soft, but had carried the audience through a journey of emotion, reflection, and connection. The room had transformed. What began as polite curiosity had become full attention, deep respect, and admiration. The audience wasn't just listening, they were experiencing, feeling, and living the song with her. When the final notes approached, a sense of anticipation filled the air. People didn't just want the song to end, they wanted to savor every last sound. They leaned forward, holding their breath, caught in a mix of excitement and wonder. Even those who had doubted her at the start now sat completely mesmerized, realizing that this girl, who had asked for just one song, had captured their hearts in ways they hadn't expected. And then, as the last note lingered and faded into silence, the room stayed still for a moment. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if everyone collectively held their breath, letting the echo of the song settle into their hearts. That brief pause was powerful, a shared moment of awe, understanding, and connection. Finally, softly at first, the applause began. People clapped, some stood, others wiped away tears, all showing appreciation not just for skill, but for courage, honesty, and heart. The girl's simple request to play just one song had created a moment that nobody would forget. She had captured the attention, admiration, and respect of everyone present, and she had done it with nothing more than honesty, courage, and music. As the last soft notes faded, the girl at the piano didn't immediately rise from her seat. She let her hands hover over the keys, as if gathering the courage to continue, though she didn't need it. The room, which had just been drawn in by her opening melody, now felt different, heavier, yet lighter at the same time. It was as if the music had shifted the air, changed the atmosphere, and made everyone present pause in a way they hadn't expected. The audience was no longer just listening. They were absorbing, feeling, and connecting. The girl took a slow, steady breath. Her eyes were still closed, but the confidence in her posture had grown. She didn't rush because she didn't need to. Every note she played carried meaning, and the audience understood that. They leaned forward in their seats, sensing that what was about to come was something even more powerful than the delicate opening. Even those who had arrived late now stopped in their tracks, quietly trying to catch a glimpse, trying to not miss a single moment of what was unfolding. With the next few notes, the melody began to rise, stronger and fuller. The soft, gentle beginning had set the stage, and now it was building. The music started to fill every corner of the hall. The sound was richer, more vibrant, yet it never lost the honesty that had captivated everyone from the start. Each chord seemed carefully chosen, deliberate, like words in a story being told without speaking. The audience felt it in their chests, a subtle vibration that made the emotions almost physical. People who had been skeptical at first now found themselves leaning forward, unable to look away. The ones who had whispered doubt now sat completely still, absorbed by the transformation that was taking place before their eyes. They began to realize that this was not just a song. It was an experience, something rare and unrepeatable. The music wasn't just being played, it was being shared, and in that sharing, it was creating a connection between the performer and everyone listening. Some in the audience began to feel emotions they hadn't anticipated. A woman in the middle row placed her hand over her heart, as though trying to steady herself. A man at the back, who had been tapping his fingers impatiently moments ago, now rested his hands on his knees, completely attentive. Even the children, who had been restless before, were now sitting quietly, their eyes wide with wonder. The girl at the piano had taken something ordinary, a simple song, and made it extraordinary by the way she played it. By the honesty she poured into it, the melody now began to evolve, growing in depth and complexity. It was still gentle, still personal, but now there was a confidence in the music. A sense that the girl was telling her story without fear. She leaned slightly forward, pressing the keys with purpose, letting certain notes linger just long enough for the audience to feel their weight. Each pause was intentional, each rise in tone deliberate. It was clear that she had mastered not just the mechanics of music, but the art of making people feel. Across the hall, people exchanged glances. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that what was happening was special. The audience was no longer separate from the performance, they were part of it. Each person reacted in their own way, yet all were affected by the same thread, the raw, genuine emotion flowing from the girl at the piano. Some nodded gently, following the rhythm of her fingers. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Even those who tried to hide their emotions found themselves quietly moved, tears welling up, lips pressing together to stop from crying out. The girl herself seemed unaware of the effect she was having. She wasn't performing for applause or recognition. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Her focus was entirely on the song, on the story she was telling through each note, and on the emotions that flowed naturally from her heart. There was a vulnerability in her posture, but it was paired with a quiet strength, a sense that she was unafraid to be herself, unafraid to share a part of her soul with the world. A particular moment came when she hit a chord that resonated deeply. It was subtle, but it vibrated through the hall in a way that made several audience members sit up straighter. Some instinctively placed their hands on their chests, feeling the sound reverberate through them. Others leaned forward as if to catch the emotion before it floated away. That single chord seemed to carry a story of struggle, hope, and perseverance all at once. People felt it deeply, though they did not yet know its meaning. The melody continued to build, layering softness with strength, gentleness with intensity. Each part of the song had a purpose, a reason for existing, and the audience could sense it. The room was completely silent now, every person's attention fixed on the girl and her piano. It was no longer about performance standards or judging skill, it was about connection, empathy, and feeling something true. The audience began to understand that this girl was not just playing notes. She was sharing a part of her life, a part of herself, in a way that few could ever do. Even the most critical attendees felt their skepticism melt away. A few had come with high expectations, hoping to see a technical display of talent, only to be surprised by something far more human. They realized that the impact of music wasn't just in speed or complexity. It was in sincerity, in the ability to touch hearts, in the courage to be vulnerable. And this girl had done all of that with a single song. The girl's hands moved with grace and confidence, each note flowing into the next like a river. There was a rhythm to her story, a natural progression that seemed both planned and instinctive. She wasn't forcing emotion. It was emerging naturally from her connection with the piano. She allowed the audience to feel the highs and lows, the joys and sorrows, and the unspoken moments that existed between the notes. People didn't just listen, they experienced the story as if it were their own. Some began to notice the small details of her performance. The way her shoulders shifted slightly as she pressed certain keys. The way her fingers lingered over a note just long enough to create tension. The way she leaned closer to the piano, as if sharing a secret with the instrument itself. Each movement was subtle, yet it amplified the music's power. The audience could feel her emotions through every gesture, and they responded instinctively. There was a sense of intimacy in the room, as if she had invited everyone into her world for a brief, unforgettable moment. As the melody reached its most powerful section, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Every listener felt a surge of emotion that was almost overwhelming. Some closed their eyes, letting tears fall freely. Others simply sat in awe, their mouths slightly open, caught between disbelief and admiration. The girl's music had grown beyond a simple song. It had become an experience, a journey that everyone in the hall was traveling together. Even those who had been chatting or distracted earlier were now completely silent. They couldn't help it. The music demanded attention, not because it was loud or flashy, but because it was honest and real. People realized that this wasn't about entertainment alone. It was about connection, courage, and the power of expressing oneself fully without fear of judgment. And the girl, with her humble presence and simple request to play one song, had achieved it effortlessly. The melody softened slightly, giving the audience a moment to breathe, but it didn't lose its depth or impact. It was a gentle reminder that emotions don't always need to shout to be powerful. Sometimes the quietest moments carry the heaviest weight. The girl allowed each note to linger just long enough for the listeners to absorb it, to feel it in their bones, and to carry it with them long after it faded. By this point, the room was transformed. People were no longer thinking about what they had expected or what they had planned to do that evening. They were fully present, fully engaged, and fully moved. They had witnessed something rare, a young girl capturing a room with nothing but her talent, honesty, and courage. And they knew that this moment would stay with them for a long time. As the song continued toward its conclusion, the girl played with both confidence and humility. She didn't seek praise or attention. She simply wanted to express what was in her heart, and that was enough. The audience, in turn, felt privileged to witness it. They felt connected to her in a way that transcended words. A silent understanding that what they were experiencing was special and unrepeatable. And as the final notes began to fade, a sense of completion washed over the room. The melody had taken them on a journey of emotion, connection, and reflection. It had started quietly, grown into something powerful, and now, as it settled, left a lasting impression on every heart. People didn't just hear the music, they felt it, lived it, and carried a piece of it with them. The girl lifted her hands from the keys and took a deep breath, finally opening her eyes. She looked out at the audience, who were now completely silent, their faces reflecting awe, admiration, and deep respect. She hadn't sought this reaction, and yet it was clear that she had moved everyone present. Her one song had not only captured attention, it had transformed the atmosphere, created a shared experience, and left everyone in the room profoundly affected. The moment the final notes faded, the hall stayed completely silent for a few seconds, as if everyone was holding their breath, reluctant to let the spell break. It was more than a song now. It had become an experience that connected everyone in the room. People didn't clap immediately because they needed a moment to process what had just happened. The emotions were still lingering, heavy yet beautiful, and no one wanted to disturb the fragile magic. The girl slowly lifted her hands from the piano, her fingers hovering just above the keys for a brief moment. as if savoring the final connection she had shared with the music. She looked around, and for the first time she noticed the faces of the audience. Eyes were wide with surprise, some glossy with unshed tears, others reflecting admiration and awe. People whispered quietly to each other, trying to put into words what they had just witnessed. But most found words were not enough. It was then that one of the organizers, a woman in her late 40s with a kind but professional demeanor, stepped forward. She had seen many performances over the years, but something about this one had caught her completely off guard. She wasn't sure if it was the skill, the emotion, or the way the girl had commanded the room without saying a single word. But she knew it was something rare. "Can someone tell me about this song?" The organizer asked softly, not just to the girl, but almost to the room itself. "Where did it come from? Why this song?" The girl looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at the audience. Her expression was calm, but there was a depth in her eyes that made it clear she had a story to tell, one she hadn't shared before. "This song," she began, her voice soft but steady, "it's the story of my life over the past few years. Everything I've felt, everything I've gone through, I put into it. It's personal, and I never thought I would play it for anyone outside my home. But today, I wanted to share it. Just this one song." A murmur ran through the crowd, some people leaning forward, curious, others sitting silently, already moved by her honesty. The story she was revealing suddenly gave meaning to every note she had played. Each chord, each gentle pause, each rise and fall in the melody was no longer just music. It was an open window into her world. Her struggles and her triumphs. People began to understand why the song had felt so powerful. It wasn't only her technique or the beauty of the notes. It was the authenticity, the vulnerability, the courage it took to share something so personal with a room full of strangers. And in that moment, the audience realized that what they were feeling was not just admiration, it was empathy. They felt connected to her because she had trusted them with her truth. The story came out slowly, in pieces, almost like the song itself. She spoke of hard times, moments when she felt alone or unseen. She talked about nights when the piano had been her only companion, when music was the only way she could express feelings too big or too complicated to say in words. People listened in silence, some leaning forward as if to catch every detail. Others sat back, tears forming silently. Touched by her courage and honesty, a woman in the second row reached for a tissue, quietly dabbing at her eyes. A man near the back, who had been skeptical from the start, had his hand pressed to his chest, feeling the weight of her story as though it were his own. Even the children, who often struggled to understand deep emotions, seemed affected by the sincerity in her voice and the history behind the music. The audience wasn't just witnessing a performance. They were witnessing someone's life laid bare in a way that demanded respect and compassion. It became clear that this one song had been more than a piece of music. It had been a form of survival. Every note, every melody, every delicate pause carried memories of struggle, moments of despair, and glimpses of hope. And now, by sharing it, she had transformed the way the room perceived her. What had seemed like a simple, quiet performance was now recognized as an act of bravery. A moment of honesty that had stunned everyone. The organizers were equally moved. They whispered among themselves, acknowledging that they had underestimated her. They realized that talent alone was not what made the performance unforgettable. It was the story, the courage, and the humanity behind it. One of the judges, a serious-looking man who rarely displayed emotion, nodded subtly. Clearly impressed and moved by the depth of her honesty, people began to approach her quietly after the performance, not to ask for autographs or to compliment her technique, but to express how deeply they had been affected. Some shared that the song reminded them of their own struggles. Others simply wanted to say thank you for having the courage to share something so real. The girl listened humbly, offering small smiles and quiet nods, acknowledging each person without making it about herself. She didn't boast. She didn't seek attention. She had only wanted to share her one song. And yet the impact had grown far beyond what she could have imagined. Some in the audience now realized that music had the power to do more than entertain. It could heal. inspire, and create understanding. In that room, people who had come with expectations of a standard performance found themselves experiencing something that touched their hearts on a deeper level. The girl's song had reminded them of the importance of honesty, courage, and vulnerability. It reminded them that even small, quiet moments can carry enormous weight when they are genuine. As the story unfolded, a shift occurred in the room. The energy changed from polite admiration to genuine respect. People were no longer just observers. They were witnesses to a rare moment of authenticity. Conversations that had started as whispers about the girl's appearance or the brevity of her song were replaced with discussions about her courage, her resilience, and the emotion that had flowed from the piano. The focus was no longer on what she had done, but on who she was. Some audience members felt a sense of humility. They realized that their own judgments or doubts had been misplaced. They had underestimated someone because of appearances, assuming that a quiet, humble performer could not have such a powerful story or presence. The girl had shattered that assumption with nothing more than her honesty and her music. It was a powerful reminder that greatness can be quiet, that courage can be understated, and that impact does not always come from extravagance or showiness. As the room absorbed this truth, one of the organizers stepped forward to speak again. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of what had just occurred. "What you've shared today is more than a song," she said. "It's a story of resilience, courage, and honesty. You've reminded all of us why we gather to witness art, not just for entertainment, but to experience the human spirit in its most real form." The audience responded with soft applause, growing gradually as the weight of her words and the performance settled over them. Some people stood, others clapped with tears in their eyes. It was not loud, showy, or chaotic. It was sincere, respectful, and heartfelt. Every person in the hall seemed to feel the importance of the moment, recognizing that they had seen something truly special. The girl, still seated at the piano, allowed herself a small, humble smile. She had not expected this reaction, yet she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had asked for just one chance to play her song, and in return, she had given the audience an unforgettable experience, and they had given her recognition, respect, and understanding in return. Then, someone in the audience, a judge who had been quiet throughout, stepped forward. His voice was gentle but carried a sense of authority. "What you have done today is remarkable," he said. "Your song, your story, and the way you've shared it deserve to be recognized. We would like to offer you an opportunity to share your music with more people, to allow others to experience the honesty and emotion that you've brought to this room." A collective gasp went through the audience. Whispers of excitement filled the room. People exchanged glances, smiling in surprise and admiration. They understood that this was more than recognition. It was a chance for the girl to take her music beyond the small hall, to touch more hearts, to inspire more people with the courage and honesty that had already moved them so deeply. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief. She had not expected this. She had only wanted to play one song, nothing more. She had not sought fame, recognition, or applause. And yet, her honesty and courage had created an opportunity she had never imagined. She nodded slowly, humbled and quietly grateful. The audience erupted in soft applause again, this time louder, more energetic, but still filled with the sincerity that had characterized the entire moment. People in the audience now felt a shared sense of joy and pride. They had witnessed someone rise above fear, share her truth, and create a moment that would stay with everyone forever. The song that had begun as a simple, personal piece had grown into a symbol of courage, resilience, and the power of honesty. And the girl, who had only asked to play one song, had changed the room, the event, and even the lives of those who had listened, simply by being herself. After the judge's words, the hall was buzzing in a way that was completely different from before. It was no longer just a room filled with spectators. It had become a place of excitement, hope, and anticipation. People whispered to each other, sharing their amazement and admiration for the girl who had taken the stage with nothing but one song and her courage. The energy in the room felt electric, yet warm, filled with respect and genuine joy. The girl sat at the piano for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She looked around, taking in the faces of the audience, the organizers, and the judges. Each face reflected awe, surprise, and pride. She felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. She had come to play just one song, expecting nothing more than to express herself quietly. She had not imagined that her simple choice would create such a ripple of admiration and opportunity. People began to approach her, one by one. Some were audience members who wanted to express how deeply they had been touched. Others were organizers and judges, offering congratulations and sharing how her performance had moved them. Each word, each gesture, reminded her that the impact of honesty and courage could reach far beyond what she had expected. She smiled humbly at each person, nodding in gratitude. She didn't speak much, but her presence radiated sincerity and humility. One of the organizers stepped forward again, holding a small envelope. She looked at the girl with kind eyes and said, "We would like to invite you to perform at a special event, where more people can hear your music and your story. This is a chance for your song to inspire others, just as it has inspired us today." The girl's eyes widened. She felt a mix of surprise and excitement, but also a quiet nervousness. Performing for more people, sharing her story on a larger stage, it was a thought that had never crossed her mind. She had only wanted to play her song once, for herself and for this room. Yet now, her honesty and courage had opened a door she hadn't even known existed. She nodded slowly, her heart racing with emotion, and whispered a quiet, "Thank you." The audience responded immediately, clapping and cheering. Their applause filled with respect and admiration rather than simple excitement. They understood the significance of this moment. They had witnessed not just a musical performance, but a courageous act of vulnerability, honesty, and personal expression. In that instant, the girl had not only earned their applause, she had earned their hearts. A few people in the audience, moved by the performance and the story behind it, approached the stage. They wanted to shake her hand, to express gratitude for the emotions she had shared. Some even admitted that her song had reminded them of their own struggles, their own moments of fear or loneliness. Her music had created a connection that went beyond words. It had touched people in a way that few performances ever could. Even the judge who had spoken earlier seemed deeply affected. He nodded at the girl with a serious expression, as if acknowledging both her talent and her courage. "You have something rare," he said quietly, so that only she could hear. "Not just skill, but the ability to touch hearts. Keep playing. Keep sharing your music with the world." The girl's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She had never expected to receive such recognition, nor did she seek it. Yet the encouragement she received made her realize the true power of honesty and expression. Her music had not only given her a voice, it had also given her the ability to inspire, heal, and connect with others. It was a realization that filled her with both humility and determination. The room seemed to shift again, this time with a sense of celebration. People were no longer just impressed, they were joyful. They had witnessed something rare, a performance that transcended skill, a song that carried the weight of real life and emotion, and a young girl who had dared to share herself completely. The applause grew louder, more heartfelt, and more united. It was no longer a polite acknowledgement, it was a collective recognition of courage, authenticity, and humanity. As the applause continued, the girl finally rose from the piano. She stood quietly for a moment, taking in the faces of everyone present. She did not raise her arms in triumph or seek to command attention. She simply stood, humble and composed, allowing the audience to share in the moment with her. Their admiration was not for her ego, it was for her heart, her courage, and the honesty she had shown. A few of the other performers, who had watched from the wings, were also moved. They had expected to see a standard recital, maybe even a competition for skill and showmanship. Instead, they witnessed a young girl transform a room with sincerity and bravery. Some of them felt inspired, realizing that their own performances could be more than just technique. they could also be acts of personal truth and expression. The girl's story began to spread quietly through the audience. People shared what they had seen with friends and family, recounting the moment when one simple song had captured an entire hall. They spoke not only of the music itself, but of the honesty and vulnerability that had made it unforgettable. Each retelling carried the same admiration, the same awe, and the same acknowledgement that they had witnessed something special. Later, as the hall began to empty, the girl lingered near the piano. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, remembering the journey of her song from the quiet beginnings to the powerful connection it had created. She realized that what had started as a simple, personal expression had grown into something much larger. It had become a bridge between herself and countless hearts, a reminder that honesty and courage could inspire and move people in ways that skill alone could not. The organizers approached her once more, this time with a notebook filled with offers and opportunities. They spoke gently, explaining that several people wanted to help her share her music on larger stages, in concerts and even in recordings. The girl listened quietly, absorbing the significance of each suggestion. She hadn't sought recognition, but now she understood that her choice to play one song had opened doors she could not have imagined. Each opportunity was a chance to touch more hearts, to share her story, and to inspire others through music outside the hall. The audience spilled into the evening streets, still talking about what they had witnessed. Some stopped to reflect quietly, replaying the melody in their minds. Others shared stories with companions, recalling the small details, the gentle pauses, the expressive gestures, the moments of vulnerability. The impact of the performance had spread beyond the walls of the hall. Lingering in thoughts and hearts, the girl herself stepped outside last, carrying a quiet sense of fulfillment. She realized that the power of one song, played with honesty and courage, could create change in ways she had never anticipated. She felt gratitude not for recognition or applause, but for the opportunity to connect with people, to share a part of herself, and to experience the profound impact of honesty and vulnerability. Days later, she received messages and invitations from people who had been in the audience. They spoke of how the song had moved them, how it had reminded them of their own experiences, and how it had inspired them to face challenges in their own lives. The realization struck her that her music had the power not just to express her emotions, but to reach into the hearts of others and make a meaningful difference. The girl understood that this was only the beginning. Her journey was not just about one song, but about the courage to share her story through music, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the determination to connect with others on a human level. She had learned that even a small act done with honesty and heart could create profound change not only in her life but in the lives of everyone who listened. And so, with a quiet smile and renewed determination, she prepared for the opportunities ahead. She knew there would be challenges, new stages, and new audiences, but she also knew the power she held within her music. One simple song had shown her that courage, honesty, and vulnerability could open doors she had never imagined and could touch hearts far beyond her own. In the end, the girl had started with a single desire, to play one song. But by following her heart, she had created a moment that changed the lives of everyone in that room, and began a journey that would allow her to inspire countless others. The song had ended, but its impact would linger, a reminder that sometimes one moment of honesty and courage is all it takes to leave a mark that lasts forever.